Back live here on the RAS YouTube channel with NFL live streams at 9 a.m. on Wednesdays. What a great day to be back with each and every one of you. Good to see so many faces in the live chat. This video is going to be a lot of fun. I'm going to give you my 10 boldest predictions for the upcoming NFL season. There will absolutely be bets that are available to tie to these. So we'll go through them one by one, give you my quick takes on each, and we'll get to laugh at these or really celebrate them come the end of the season, because there's some pretty bold ones. I don't typically go like the hot take route, but we're going to press the envelope a little bit here with some of these takes. So this one is going to be a very fun show. If it's your first time here, there's a subscribe button down below. Again, we'll be doing these NFL live streams every single Wednesday at 9 a.m. So it'd be great to have you on the channel. And I want to tell you about two other things before we get going. There is college football coming to live streams here on the RAS Picks YouTube channel. Eddie Walls and John Martin will be live streaming tomorrow afternoon and every Thursday at 2 p.m. So keep an eye for that. Good reason to turn on the notifications by hitting the bell below as well, so you get updated with all of the live streams. We'll have NFL Wednesday morning, CFB Thursday afternoon, and then release shows every Saturday and Sunday morning beginning this weekend, 8 a.m. actually, better than 9 a.m., 8 a.m. Pacific time. We'll get going with college football. When I say there's going to be a twist with that show coming up, that is no understatement. That's going to be a release show you want to tune into this Saturday morning at 8 a.m. Pacific here on the RAS Picks YouTube channel. So with all that said, lots of fun content coming up. Football is finally back. Let's get into it. We have to say hello to some folks. Iowa Pete back for another show. Adam Orphan, of course. Good to see you in the channel as well. Sebastian's back. George is back, and he's happy. I'm happy too, George. We've got NFL football to talk about. There is absolutely nothing better. Good to see Garrett. If it's the Riley Carroll, I know. Good to see you back here in the channel as well. We had H-Train earlier who jumped in as the first commenter, along with Preston, who's just south of the border in northwestern Washington state. So there's a lot to get to. Let's start with number one of the 10 bold predictions for the NFL season coming up. Carolina Panthers win the number 7 seed in the NFC. They make the playoffs as a wild card team. Last year, 2 wins. This year, completely different story. We have a brand new coaching staff led by Dave Canales. This is an offensive and modern-driven scheme, and Dave Canales has been tied to QB resurgence in the last couple of years. He brought Baker Mayfield back from being written off last year in Tampa Bay, led Baker to his career passing season. He did the same thing with Geno Smith in Seattle. He also led Russell Wilson to his best passing season as well. So Canales and his history with quarterbacks is very, very strong. And I look at what happened last year with Bryce Young coming in as a top draft pick, all the hype that was around him in Carolina. I can't help but look and compare this Panthers team to the Jags in 2021 and 2022. When we think about, they drafted Lawrence, they had a coaching staff that was very unstable. There were a lot of question marks around the playmakers. They have a horrible season. They fire the coach midway. They go through a lot of changes, a lot of turnover, and then they bring in an adult to run the team. They brought in Doug Peterson, and you saw what a top quarterback draft pick with all the hype looks like when he's matched with the right play calling and the right scheme. And so I think that very similar thing is going to happen. And like the Jags made a run to the playoffs, I think the Panthers can be a surprise team and make the run to the playoffs too. I think we're going to see the offense look a lot better with wide receivers getting open. Last year's separation was a disaster. I mean, nobody was getting open. It's easy to point the finger at Bryce Young. Nobody was getting open. Let's be honest about that. There was no spacing. There was no creativity in the offense. It was brutal. It was painful. And now you have the potential with Brad Idzik, the wide receiver coach, coming over from Tampa Bay, who knows Canales well, very analytically driven. He is going to get guys open. And we've seen that and heard that so far in the preseason and training camp. The practices against the Jets apparently look very good. And that's a great Jets defense, which we'll talk about in a few of these comments. But I think it's a year where the Carolina Panthers exceed expectations. I think they get the number 7 seed in the NFC. And if we want to talk about bets, you can find them as a wild card seed at 10-1. And that would be any wild card seed. So if they exceed expectations even more, maybe they sneak up there a little bit. You can find that at 8-1. But at Right Angle Sports, we're already on the over for the win total as a bet that we sent out earlier in the year. When I brought this take up on the Colin Cowherd show, it was roasted in the comments. And I'm happy to put this on the record here on the RAS Picks YouTube channel as well, the home for these live streams. Carolina Panthers surprise and get the number 7 seed in the playoffs. You're dead, my son says the Bryce train is leaving the station. Well, we're all on board. Last year, it was the Desmond Ridder train for many folks. I think we get a lot better fortune here with Bryce Young. We talk about those expectations too. I mean, their win total last year was 7.5. It's down to 5.5 this year, open 4.5. Just a massive drop in pricing for the Panthers, and the schedule that they face couldn't be easier. So that is number 1 of 10 for bold predictions for the upcoming season. Let's get to number 2. This one's a bit of a combo, perhaps a bit surprising. We'll go to the other side of the spectrum, and I will say San Francisco, Dallas, and Baltimore each have less than 10 wins. Predicting these teams to win 9 games or less, all 3 of them. Let's talk about San Francisco first. A lot of uncertainty beginning the year. We don't know what's going on with Trent Williams. We don't know what's going on with Brandon Ayuk. There is still time for San Francisco to sort these guys out before the season starts. I believe that even if they do, and we get news in the coming days, despite hearing Williams is miles away from sorting it out, the Ayuk situation is a mess. Even if they sort it out, I think it's a slow start for the 49ers, and it's slow enough that it derails these very high expectations for the team. If you don't have Trent Williams on the field, we saw what happened last year for this offense. It's ugly. In the 3 games without him, they scored 17 points. And you take him away from this offensive line, there's nothing around him. This is an offensive line that, with Trent Williams, is rated bottom 12 in the NFL. So you take the best offensive lineman by a mile off of that line, potentially, to begin the year. That line is taking a big step back. And we saw what it looks like now dealing with injuries against the Raiders in the final week of preseason. The Raiders' backups were living in the backfield, and Brock Purdy was running around for his life. Now, don't get me wrong. There's still great offensive weapons on this team, but Trent Williams needs to be there for this offense to be able to play to its peak. The same can be said about Brandon Ayuk, because you take him off of the field from what he provided to this offense last year, and I don't believe that the 49ers have an offense that can compete at the highest level like they're going to need to as the season goes on. What he does outside is so valuable to this offense because they play such tight, condensed formations. They need that true outside wide receiver that can go out and win, and Ayuk is their guy for that. You take him away, you're not getting that from Ricky Pearsall. You're not getting that from Juwan Jennings. There's nobody on this team that can do anywhere close to what Ayuk does out wide. And that's why he was 14 yards per route run. He was number 1 in EPA per target last year, because he's such a valuable piece to this offense. The combination of these two not being there is enormous. And so I think the 49ers start slow, high expectations, a tougher division around them with all the teams drawing a lot of intrigue. I think the 49ers are going to have a tough year, still going to be good, still going to be competitive. But for the bold prediction, we're going to say less than 10 wins. Dallas, I don't get any hype or excitement for this team whatsoever. And we have another one of these predictions tied to Dallas later on how ugly this could get. But I look at the Dallas Cowboys, it's Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb, and skill position-wise past that, I think it's a hard argument to make that the Cowboys' skill players are in the top 10 of the league. And I think it's a hard argument to make they're in the top 5 of the NFC. The running back room is graded out 32nd in the NFL. It's the worst offensive line Dak Prescott has ever played behind in his time in Dallas. And you're telling me that this team is going to come out in the NFC and win 10-plus games? I don't buy it at all. I'm not seeing it from this offense. And God forbid there's one injury along the way to either of these guys. This could be a complete disaster for the Cowboys. Defensively, they wanted to take an all-in approach to the offseason. That's what Jerry Jones was driving. We're going to be all in. This is the year. They didn't add anybody. There's nobody out there. And now you lose Deron Bland from the secondary for at least 8 weeks. You're all of a sudden relying on Trayvon Diggs to step into this defense and be the same player he was, which was a player that gambled a lot and benefited a ton from the pass rush that was in front of him, allowing him to make big defensive plays. EPA per turnover, when you look at some of the plays that he made, was off the charts. And whether that's luck or good fortune or benefit of pass rush, you choose. But I just don't buy that this secondary is going to be as good, nor will the pass rush be as good, because the offense is not going to be nearly as good as it was last year when they scored more than 500 points. I just don't see it without any run game and a big step back on the offensive line. So I put the Cowboys in this same window where they're winning less than 10 games. The Baltimore Ravens, the third team in this trio, I see winning less than 10 games as a top team in the league that may underperform. To me, there's two things that stand out here. Number one, the loss of Mike Macdonald. That cannot be overstated enough for how much it's going to impact this defense. Baltimore has been decent in terms of internal promotions and succession from players within or coordinators within moving up and taking over these jobs. The transition, I don't think, is going to be as steep in terms of the impact, but the week-to-week game planning that Mike Macdonald brought with his scheme is not going to be replicated by Zach Orr. It was a historically great defense last year for the Ravens. They're not repeating at that level. It's not happening. They're not going to get the same effort. Could they still be top 10? Absolutely. But when we talk about historically great, to all of a sudden dropping down into like 7th or 8th, it's a massive drop-off. Offensively, there's a lot of intrigue about Lamar and Henry. I don't know how sustainable it is with the offensive line in the turmoil that it's facing. On the preview podcast on the Simple Handicap, I had Ken McCusick on, who does scouting for the Baltimore Ravens. He said his major concern was the offensive line. The pieces they lost, the inability for it to come together. Part of the reason that none of the starters played in the preseason on offense was because there's no trust in the offensive line. And it's a problem that goes back to the draft, and the Ravens neglected to fix it. And so this is going to be the worst offensive line the Ravens have put on the field in the tenure for Lamar. Not necessarily a problem because he's so mobile. It negates it. But that's going to put this offense away from the timing part that Todd Monken wanted to institute. It's going to force them into a lot of 2 tight end looks, and it's going to allow defenses to defend it a lot easier. And so to me, the Baltimore Ravens, a third team here that's going to take a step back and win less than 10 games in 2024. Check on a couple of comments. Good to hear everybody jumping in. There's a live chat on the right-hand side of the screen if you're on the YouTube app. If you're joining in late, of course, there's comments below. I always love to hear from everybody in the comments below. We see Michael coming in. First ticket in season account for me was New York Jets plus 4.5 on Monday. Kicking myself for not getting the 6. That's in regards to the San Francisco 49ers dealing with injuries. We've seen that number come down because there's the injuries, there's the holdouts or the hold-ins, however you want to phrase that now, with that becoming in fashion a little bit, with guys being there but not participating in the team activities. So that's why that line is moving, and that's probably a pretty good grab there. Garrett says, whoa, the Dallas Cowboys signed Dalvin Cook. Clueless franchise is an interesting way to put it. We'll talk about another prediction we have here for the season for the Cowboys coming up. But, I mean, they added Zeke in the running back room. Now you're adding Dalvin Cook. That sounds amazing if it's 2018. We're not there yet. We're in 2024. So that's quite an interesting look for sure. Take and prediction number 3. We'll have 2 of the teams I really think are going to exceed and outperform. Number 1, the Philadelphia Eagles win the NFC, and Hurts passes for 4,000 yards or more. And so that Hurts price is actually available. I found it at 4-1 this morning when looking around if you want him for 4,000 yards or more. And then Philadelphia winning the NFC, that is available at plus 550 were prices that I found. There's also a couple 6-1 sitting out there. So 2 bigger plus money prices on this one. I love everything about the Philadelphia Eagles. We just heard about the pessimism that I have for the Dallas Cowboys, and a lot of that stems from how much I like the Philadelphia Eagles this year. So offensively, I think it's going to be night and day versus what we saw last year. Last year was just an inability to adapt. Brian Johnson's the offensive coordinator. He steps in. He's friendly with Jalen Hurts. It was such a big drop-off from Shane Steichen that was the big fear with the Eagles, and we saw it realized. Steichen, we saw lead the Colts nearly to the playoffs with Gardner Minshew as a quarterback. We had last year, the Eagles had this all-star team of weapons and couldn't adjust when teams went from playing a lot of cover 1 to playing cover 2 against Hurts. And then all of a sudden said, well, they're not going to adjust to anything. We're just going to blitz Hurts as much as possible. And we saw Hurts completely struggle. And it was just a mess on offense last year. Not going to be the same scenario this year. Kellen Moore is in as the offensive coordinator. And things we've heard all preseason was Jalen Hurts in the speed option with Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown getting moved around the formation and the ball not touching the ground when it's thrown his way. Tons of pre-snap motion, tons of creativity, more downfield passing. It's everything that you want to hear. And I believe all of it because everywhere that Kellen Moore has gone, he's been among the fastest snap to snap in the league. He's been among the highest for no huddle rates. All of these things fit into what the Eagles do well and where Jalen Hurts performs the best. Saquon Barkley, as an addition, is going to give the Eagles the answers to when those defenses decide to play cover 2 against them. We also get Dallas Goedert coming back after dealing with injuries last year. They need to get him going because those seam routes and attacking the middle of the field weren't there. So now it's a scenario where you have 2 elite wide receivers. It's an interesting ad with Dotson coming over from Washington. But if defenses go back to doing what they did in the past and playing a lot of cover 1 because they have to respect the run from Jalen Hurts, you have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith on the outside who are deadly. And Kellen Moore is going to be able to utilize that. If teams adjust to play cover 2, well, now all of a sudden you have this dynamic pass catching back in Saquon Barkley in his best scenario ever in his career to give Hurts an outlet. And if we get the all-out blitz, all of a sudden you have an offensive coordinator that's prepared to adjust for it. To me, this is an Eagles offense that's incredibly well equipped to defend what defenses are doing well and some of the high-level trends along the league. And I think they're going to have a great offensive season. Defensively, the team just flat out quit last year. It was embarrassing. The inability to tackle, the team didn't care by the end of the season. And how can you blame him when you're playing for Matt Patricia, an absolute child running the defense? Nobody can get inspired playing for Matt Patricia. The guy is a bit of a joke at this point in his career. The difference between him and Sean Desai, who just got randomly promoted in the second half of the year, going to Vic Fangio in terms of the level of adulthood that's going to be running the defense and just flat out professionalism, is night and day. But I also love that the Eagles went and addressed their biggest issue, which was talent in the secondary. And so I think you're going to see an elevated play from the secondary. And that's an easy thing to say. It can't get worse than what they did last year. So you're going to get elevated play from the secondary. You have a much better scheme around it. And flat out, the players are just, they're not going to quit like they did last year, which is a plus all around. So to me, the Eagles improve on defense. Offensively, the ceiling is enormous here. I like the Philadelphia Eagles to win the NFC. And I'd like Hurts to throw for 4,000 plus yards, his best passing season of his career. Sebastian says Eagles game should be high scoring. Yes and no. I think offensively, the Eagles are going to be very hard to defend, but defensively, I wouldn't count out the improvement for a pretty big step forward from this Eagles unit. Horatio says, yes, yes, yes on the Eagles. I like the enthusiasm. Saquon is going to go ham this year. I've never said ham on a live stream, but here we are. Hopefully I'm putting enough emphasis on that for the capitals that you threw in there, Horatio. Harshest comment on Patricia ever by Adam. I mean, I rarely swear. I was borderline close to doing that here on the live stream, but the Canadian in me keeps it kind of polite, but it's true. Nobody wants to play for that guy, plain and simple. Prediction number 4, Kansas City wins the AFC. Okay, grown. That's not a big prediction. Perhaps to tie in to make it a bit of a bigger prediction, Mahomes will throw for 5,000 plus yards, the third time he will do that in his career. Now, I didn't, in the quick look that I went through, find passers to throw for 5,000 plus yards. If you see that at one of your sports books, I would love to know in the comments. Kansas City to win the AFC, obviously priced near the top of the odds board. But I want to say this about Kansas City is I listen to a lot of previews. I listen to a lot of podcasts. I read a lot of books. I don't see unanimous expectations across the board that the Chiefs are going to be better this year. And I feel it's true with the Chiefs every year, and everyone's consistently wrong. But to me, this year for Kansas City is the one year of the last 4 or 5 where everybody should be adamant that they are going to improve on both sides of the football. Because if I think back on the last couple years for the Kansas City Chiefs, there were years where how can they overcome the loss of Tyreek Hill? There were years where they didn't have wide receivers. There were years where the defense is going to be a major problem. There were years where the offensive line was going to hold them back. There has always been something that you can point at and pick to the Chiefs. And you can take a step back and say, you know, that kind of makes a little bit of sense. I don't have any of those this year. I don't know how anyone can, because now there's wide receivers. Now there's an offensive line that's returning 4 to 5 starters. Now there's a defense that's returning everybody but L'Jarius Sneed. You have 8 starters who have now been in the system for 3 years or more. And it's a unit last year on defense that we saw from the start of the season to the end of the year play inside the top 10 in every major advanced stat that you can want to look at. And so the big thing last year that I made the stance for was Kansas City is going to be great because Patrick Mahomes has never had a defense that's been above average his entire career. And he got one that's top 5 that really negated an offensive season for the Chiefs. There was a lot of struggle. I mean, I think back to the Christmas Day game against the Raiders and the games after that, where it was week 16 and 17, and they were working on changing the cadence. They were trying to break the huddle quicker. They were trying to snap the ball quicker because wide receivers didn't know where to line up, and they couldn't handle being at the line of scrimmage. Now this year, what more can you ask for the Chiefs? You now have wide receivers. You have an offseason that has been driven by Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid talking about how they want to get back to throwing the deep ball because they finally have wide receivers that they can trust. You have Worthy breaking out in camp. You have the suspension that should have occurred for Rice now seemingly not happening this season. And you have Brown with the injury sustained. I get it, but at week 2, he's back at the latest. I mean, we haven't seen Patrick Mahomes with the potential to have this big of an offensive season in about 4 years. And this, to me, should just be like the unanimous, adamant stance that everybody has, but I'm just not hearing a lot of it. And so I think this is the best team for Kansas City, offense and defense combined, that Andy Reid has ever had. I think it's the best offense and defense Patrick Mahomes has ever had. What more do you want? And so to me, it's a comfortable Chiefs AFC win. And I think we see Patrick Mahomes for the 3rd time in his career go over 5,000 yards passing. Now, the one thing that I would say is I don't know if this deep ball talk is going to immediately go on the field and it's just going to be wide open and we're back to 2018 and 2019 where it's just out of this world in terms of production. What I do think is going to happen is it's just going to free up everything in tight and close. I don't think defenses are just going to concede the deep ball, but the speed that is now on the field for the Chiefs is going to open up everything that they have been forced to do the last 2 years by necessity, either by how defenses have played them and sat on everything or by the lack of wide receivers. Now you add the speed, it's just going to stretch everything. And those passes that they've become so proficient at the last couple of years underneath and close to the line of scrimmage, those are just going to become way too easy. I don't think it's going to be this massive spike in yards per attempt. It's going to be higher, but I think that it's being interpreted a little bit in the wrong way, but it's still going to be just a dynamic and explosive offense. No question about it. So Chiefs win the NFC and Patrick Mahomes over 5,000 yards for prediction number 4. Are you buying in on Xavier Worthy right away? Typically in Andy Reid offenses, we see rookies tend to have a bit of a slower start. This training camp and offseason has suggested the complete opposite. It seems like he's going to get involved right away. He's going to be wide receiver 1, probably not, but I think we see him right away emerge as a very strong wide receiver 3 in this offense. Let's get to prediction number 5. We'll stick in the AFC. And here we go. The Jets end the drought. They win a playoff game. Whew, we're going back a long time. They win a playoff game for the first time since 2010. They actually won the game. They won 2 of them in January of 2011 for the 2010 season. Watched those games with a major smile on my face in Port of Spain, Trinidad and Tobago, in the back room of a sports book on a very tiny screen that was posted on the wall, and very few people had any idea what I was watching, nor why I was excited about it, but that was a special time, and that was a much younger Adam than what we're looking at right now. So I'm very confident in the Jets' ability to rebound this year, and I do think that they win at least 1 playoff game. Now, if we want to look at odds for this, you can find them 4-1 to be eliminated in the division round, which, depending how you look at it for the wild card spot, if you think they're a wild card team, you can look at that. And then they're 9-1 to be eliminated in the conference round as well. So depending on how you want to bet this, to make the playoff price is -172. That's been bet up a little bit. You can go there. You can go win total, AFC East, or you can do point of elimination. I would say you can be comfortable with the win total and to make the playoff price. I think both of those look at good bets. But if you want to look around, maybe you have a prop where they can win a playoff game as well at your sports book. This is the best roster that the Jets have had in 25 years. When I look at roster ratings that I trust and I believe in, the Jets are a consensus top 5. Some guys that I really trust have the Jets rated number 2. This is a loaded roster on offense, and it is a loaded roster on defense. And if I want to go to kind of a team comparison to why this can work, because everybody's watching this and saying, Rodgers is 40. He's off of a neck or Achilles injury. Why would I want to get involved in that? Why would I want to bet on that? If I go back to 2011 and 2012, almost to the last time the Jets won a playoff game, I think about the Denver Broncos. They had a quarterback, you might remember, named Tim Tebow in 2011, lead this amazing season. But what really drove that year for the Broncos was the defense. Multiple Pro Bowlers. It was an elite defense, but it was always hampered by the offense and the inability to score points. The next year, the Broncos went and brought in Peyton Manning, who was dinged up at the latter portion of his career, was getting up there in the high 30s. He brought him in, and what Peyton Manning did to that offense was exceed expectations, absolutely. But what really mattered to that Broncos team in 2012 that went 13-3 was it stabilized the defense. So I think last year for the Jets defensively, they were playing opposite an offense that scored the second fewest touchdowns and snapped the football with a lead in the second half the second fewest times. Only Carolina was worse. And this was a Jets defense that was still playing for the season-long numbers inside the top 6 in all advanced stats. And that's just a reflection of the talent that's on the defensive side for the Jets, but how well it's coached and how well it's coordinated. And all of those elite players, less Bryce Huff, return this season. The whole core is back. And so to me, the Jets offense legitimately, and this isn't overstating and this is not a wild prediction, they might score 20 more touchdowns this year than they did last year. And that's not a major leap in saying how many touchdowns the Jets offense can score. And so just by virtue of Aaron Rodgers not being as bad as what the Jets have put on the field at quarterback for the last number of years is going to bring the defense to another level where I don't see regression happening. I actually see them improving on the numbers defensively of what they've put on the field. This defense for the Jets can be that good. You don't need an MVP season from Rodgers for the Jets to make the playoffs and win a playoff game. You need Aaron Rodgers to be serviceable. This Jets team is going to be a run-first team as it is. This is not going to be a Jets team that lives on the past. They want to run the football. They want to use Breece Hall. They want to use Braylon Allen. This is not an offense that's going to be letting Aaron Rodgers drop back 30-plus times and him throwing it all over. I think that that's taken out of context. They want to run the football, and that is going to set the defense up for much better scenarios. And I think they replicate, not to the same winning extent where how far the Broncos went, but I think that 2011, 2012 Broncos switch over with Manning coming in is a good reflection of what the Jets could look like this year. And I think they win a playoff game come January. Let's go to prediction number 6. These are fun. We're moving along pretty good here. Prediction number 6, not necessarily tied to a betting standpoint, perhaps, but I'll go number 6 and say the Arizona Cardinals score more than 500 points on the season. Now, you can do it this as you will on a weekly basis, but I think the Arizona Cardinals are going to do something that not a lot of teams do. The Dallas Cowboys did it last year. 2 years ago, there was no team that did it, and then it was the Buccaneers and the Cowboys in 2021 that did it as well. The 2020 year, there were 3 teams. That's a bit of an anomaly because of how our offenses could operate at the line of scrimmage, but it's getting a lot harder to do as defenses change coverages. But I think the Arizona Cardinals can do it this year, and they're a team that every single week is going to be in very high-scoring games. So defensively, even if Jonathan Gannon pulls out a miracle season and the defensive side of the football is his main focus as a head coach, he's great as is, he gets a lot of effort. If you tell me he has the best coaching season leading a defense that you could possibly imagine, I would say the absolute ceiling for this Cardinals defense is 20th in the league. This is the lowest rated, the lowest graded, and the worst defense in football without question coming into the season. And the idea that any unit on this team can be developed to an above average unit, I think is a big stretch. I think every single week the Cardinals are going to struggle. And what that is going to do to the offense is turn an offense that wants to be very physical, that wants to be very run heavy, that wants to use James Conner, that wants to use Benson, that wants to have multiple tight ends behind a very physical offensive line. It's going to completely flip them. And what we're going to see is an offense that looked like what the offense did for the final half of last season, where they were 8th in EPA per play once Kyler Murray returned, but elevated. This team is going to be forced into passing a ton. And the idea of Kyler Murray throwing to McBride, throwing to Harrison Jr., throwing to Connor out of the backfield, throwing to Michael Wilson, who's extremely underrated, and doing so primarily in indoor games or warm weather games, to me is just a recipe for an absolute shootout every single week that the Cardinals are going to find them in. And so I don't see a scenario where this defense is anything, and that's just going to put the offense having to have their foot on the gas for the majority of games. And just given how the schedule looks and how many favorable spots the Cardinals play in for weather and domes and indoors, this is bombs away all season long. So I think you're looking at a big year from Kyler Murray. You're looking at Harrison Jr. stepping in as an immediate wide receiver number 1 and having a huge year. And this offense in chase mode is just going to be deadly. So to me, the Cardinals are going to be a team that scores at least 500 points, an increase, believe it or not, of 170 points from where they were last year. And if you want to bet for this, you can find the Cardinals to be the highest scoring team in the NFL at 50-1 this morning, which I think is a price that is way too high. So it's going to be the Arizona Cardinals scoring 500 plus points. Harrison Jr. overs. I think if I was to look at him, you can find offensive rookie of the year around 8-1. His receiving yards price off the top of my head is around 1250. I think that I would prefer the offensive rookie of the year more than I would with the straight receiving yards over. But I like both of those. And as Tommy says, the overs are already juiced up, I believe, which is why I'm kind of looking at that offensive rookie of the year. If he goes over, he's obviously competing with 2 quarterbacks that have big years themselves, but he's going to stand out too well. So I think we're seeing a major leap for the Cardinals points. Sebastian says 500 points comes up to them averaging 30 points a game. We're here for bold predictions, Sebastian. We're not just tossing layups. I'll get picked on for the Chiefs one. I get it, but thought it was fair to balance it out. But we're not holding back. The bold predictions for a reason. We're not coming in with timid predictions. So that's what I'm coming with for the Arizona Cardinals. Let's go to number 7. Sticking in the NFC West, Mike Macdonald wins Coach of the Year. You can find this right now at 18-1. It's a price that is being bet in a little bit because we're starting to see the impact that Mike Macdonald is going to have on the Seattle Seahawks. I think Macdonald ends up very soon, whether it be this year or over the next 3 years, as a top 5 head coach in the NFL. His defensive scheme is revered by everybody in the NFL that is in coaching. I mean, what he did last year with the Baltimore Ravens was at a historic level. DVOA, EPA per play, numbers you look at was incredible. Yes, there was a lot of talent there, but that was all scheme that was driving that. And what he puts on the field is so hard for offensive game planners to come up with solutions for. He's just everything that he does well, from the simulated pressures to how he disguises coverages, the way that he uses guys in the secondary, is so hard for these modern offenses to come up with game plans for. And I think going over to Seattle, while he doesn't have the same structure and pieces, what he is going to be able to put on the field with the strength of this interior line and some of the elite individuals that he has in the secondary, I think you're going to see a massive season from Witherspoon. I love everything about this Seattle Seahawks defense. And when we think about the Coach of the Year award, it skews towards first-year head coaches. It's all about improvement. It's about teams getting back into the postseason once they miss it. You're essentially looking at a most improved team award. And when I think about the offense that is on the other side, Mike Macdonald is stepping into such a good scenario because he gets what he wants with the defense. But offensively, it's a top 5 unit of wide receivers. I think Jackson Smith and Jigba is incredibly underrated coming into this season. I look at his receiving prop at 725 yards. I think that's low for how he's going to be used. You have Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf. This is a loaded group of weapons. You have 2 great running backs in the backfield, and everyone wants to slander Geno Smith. His accuracy and his deep ball passing is continuously solid every single year. So if you get a defense that is putting this offense in favorable scenarios, they're going to benefit so much from that. Last year, Seattle's defense was a mess. The amount of big plays and explosive plays that they gave up was unbelievable for a Seattle defense that's run by Pete Carroll. And this is such a big change and such a big refresh that I think we're going to see the defense really excel. And my goodness, offensively, there's such a high ceiling here with these guys. And so for me, that Mike Macdonald being as good of a head coach as he is, stepping in and bringing with him Ryan Grubb from Washington and where the Seahawks team can go, you have to be optimistic about it. It's such a good spot. And so coach of the year for Mike Macdonald, I think, is a very easy decision to make at the current prices that he is at. Let's go to prediction number 8 before we jump into some of the comments. Maxx Crosby wins Defensive Player of the Year. And I'm going to put a tag of 18 sacks on Maxx Crosby for this season, which is an enormous number. But I think it's a number that could absolutely be attained because last year, Maxx Crosby got 11 sacks, and he was doing so in a defense where he was double teamed by offensive linemen at the 6th highest rate in the NFL. Despite that, Maxx Crosby was still top 10 in pressure rate. So this season, what's going to be different? Well, Antonio Pierce steps in full time. There's going to be a push to be aggressive. Patrick Graham's going to allow Maxx Crosby to do whatever he wants. But most importantly, in the middle of that defensive line, there's somebody named Christian Wilkins, who comes in from Miami, who is just an absolute mess to deal with for offensive lines in the middle. And so now if all of a sudden you have him freeing up space and freeing up Maxx Crosby outside, because there's no way that teams are going to be able to double Crosby at the same rate that they have been, it's going to allow Crosby so much more freedom and so much more ability to get in the backfield and finish off plays and get sacks. That I think this is a really good bet to look at. And I think it's a prediction that, honestly, if I'm ranking how bold some of these are, I'm putting these on the lower tier of boldness because I think this scenario this year fits in so well for him. The question is, how much support is he going to get from the secondary? Last year, the Raiders, they played very soft. We're very off coverage a lot of times. If he can get a little bit of an improvement in another year in this system from the secondary, just for that extra half second in coverage, I think he's going to have a big sack year. So just with the freedom he's going to have and the situation, I really like Maxx Crosby this year. I think he puts up a big sack number for the Raiders. David Jackson says, great to see you back. Love the consistent team previews with local reporters. Such great pods. Thank you. Hopefully we all make some money. Appreciate you listening, David. That was great to see. Brian C. with a Pete Carroll joke. Over 1,247 pieces of gum chewed on the sideline is easy money at FanDuel. That's a decent one, but unfortunately he's no longer there, Ryan, which Garrett points out as well. But a good joke in the past, certainly there for sure. So, to look at what they had last year with him to now go to Mike Macdonald. Mike Macdonald's allowed the defense in camp to tackle to the ground since day one. So it's like you hear all these teams, and Pete was certainly at the end of his career not in that style of camp. Mike Macdonald came in day one, and he's like, this is different. We're cleaning the slate. This is the standard. Here's what we're going for. And it showed in preseason. We didn't see a ton of the defense, but that defense was playing at another speed and another level in the glimpses that we saw in the preseason. I think it carries over to early season. I think it's a great year for a Seahawks fan. I think it's a great year if you have a Mike Macdonald ticket in your account. I said we had another Cowboys prediction. Pretty grim episode if you're a Cowboys fan. Prediction number 9, Mike McCarthy is the first head coach fired this season. Top of the odds board is Brian Daboll. Then you have Dennis Allen with the Saints. Something I don't understand is you have Jonathan Gannon from Arizona. Gannon's not going anywhere. I think that's just a wildly mispriced number. Then you have Mike McCarthy at 7-1. And there's a couple things playing into this. We talked about the Cowboys in the prediction number 2, where I said they're not going to win 10 games. So you have an offensive line that is unraveling. You have a very top-heavy offense. You have a horrible ground game. And you have a defense that now suffered a big injury to Bland, and it didn't do anything to improve. But there's now beginning to be a bit of a kind of back and forth going on between McCarthy and Jerry Jones. And we all were expecting McCarthy to be fired after the embarrassing loss to Green Bay. This is now the final year for Mike McCarthy in his contract. Nobody is expecting McCarthy to be extended past this season. I don't think anybody would say that they have any level of confidence in that happening. So I'm looking at the season and saying, Jerry Jones isn't getting younger. He's sitting up there, and it's an embarrassing playoff loss that could potentially roll into a season where CeeDee Lamb missed all of camp. He says he's ready to go. Let's believe him. Things aren't going well for the Cowboys early. We know Jerry Jones wants to run the football. There's nobody in the backfield to run the football. And we know that Jerry Jones loves to have a bit of a mandate. I see McCarthy being put in a bit of a bind here where if they're trying to run the football and that's not working, and offensively teams are able to take away CeeDee Lamb, and you don't have backup wide receivers there at the 2, 3, 4 spots to produce the offensive numbers, and the defense isn't getting as fortunate. If the losses start to pile up for the Cowboys, and Jones is sitting up there in the box watching this team struggle, knowing that, well, McCarthy's done at the end of the year, we might see the unthinkable where there's the in-season firing of a coach for the Dallas Cowboys, a bit of a tongue twister to get out. I think we might see McCarthy gone before the end of the season happens if this team is struggling at the rate that I think they will. And I look at the other coaches. To me, Daboll is going to be given the year as he's taking over play calling duties. He's definitely on the hot seat, no question about it. Dennis Allen is just old and outdated at this point. We're seeing the Saints move on from that Breeze era. They got rid of Pete Carmichael. Dennis Allen is the last guy remaining. His time is certainly limited. But if I'm looking at a GM and an owner that wants to make a decision on the head coach and get a guy out of there, to me, McCarthy's on borrowed time as is, and there's so much pressure and emphasis that a bad season for the Cowboys, I think, puts him on the limb and the chopping block pretty quickly. So I think Mike McCarthy, by the end of the year, is going to be the first head coach fired in the NFL. The last one and last prediction of the 10 bold predictions for 2024, Jayden Daniels leads quarterbacks in rushing yards, a price that you can find around 10-1. I think it's a very interesting bet. This refers to all quarterbacks. There's also a rookie rushing yards leader that you can look at, and that's a very interesting market where Daniels is priced at 8-1. Number of rookies around the league not really guaranteed the spot, or they're dealing with injuries, or they're competing with a lead back in the teams. Daniels is kind of the one guy that stands out that is, if healthy, going to play every game this season. He's obviously going to have the ball in his hands every single play. In the last 2 years at LSU, he ran for 800 yards one year, 1,100 yards another year. Cliff Kingsbury is now the offensive coordinator in Washington. I look to Kyler Murray, who early in his career with Cliff, he ran for 800 yards in a season. This is an offense we saw in preseason get the ball out incredibly quick from Daniels' hands. I think in season, he's going to hold on to it for a little bit longer, and that's going to allow him the option to run a little bit. We saw Dotson released or traded, whichever it was, to the Eagles, and that now, to me, signals that the Washington Commanders are going to be pushing a little bit more empty formation. That just, to me, screams for opportunities for Daniels to find big runs out of empty formations. This is also an offensive line for the Commanders that is viewed as the weakness by a lot of previews. I don't think it's as bad as being made out to be, but I do think it's a weaker offensive line that is just naturally going to have Daniels on the move, scrambling, and committed to use his legs. And something I would say as we look across rookie QBs coming into the league that have the mobility to them, when plays are breaking down and the pockets are shrinking, these mobile quarterbacks are not hesitant to run. As they mature in their career, we see those willingness to run kind of dip back a little bit. But I think Daniels and the assets that he brings with his legs and that weapon that Cliff Kingsbury has unlocked with mobile quarterbacks in the past is going to be encouraged, and it's going to be designed, and it's going to be utilized a lot. And so to me, in these markets, it becomes pretty interesting when you're looking at Daniels in the spot he is in. The two direct comparisons would be Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson in this. I think there's going to be an emphasis, we've already heard from Todd Monken, to run Lamar less, especially so in the red zone where he was so deadly. Monken was on a podcast earlier this summer, and he was talking about how there was a mandate from Harbaugh to get him running less. So I think that's a negative on Lamar. And then Josh Allen is going to be just in a much more run-heavy ball control offense as is. But there's going to be a lot more of a traditional ground game paired with Allen than we have seen in years past. To me, the Commanders don't have that traditional ground game to pair with Daniels. And the pace that Kingsbury has operated at for so long, I think is going to exceed play rates for Washington compared to a team like Buffalo, where they're just not going to be getting off as many plays. And so to me, Daniels, especially on a team that's going to be trailing because of how bad their defense is just going to have these opportunities for scrambles and designed runs a lot. And to me, I like him to lead all quarterbacks in rushing yards. And that rookie market number for all rushers, I think is really interesting too. So you can look at both of those. So to recap, the 10 bold predictions for the 2024 season, let me know what you think was the most out of line in the live chat or the comments below. Number 1, the Panthers win the NFC number 7 seed and make the playoffs as a wild card team. Number 2, San Francisco, Dallas, and Baltimore each have less than 10 wins. Number 3, Philadelphia wins the NFC. Hurts throws for 4,000 or more yards. Number 4, Kansas City wins the AFC. Mahomes throws for 5,000 yards or more. Number 5, the Jets win a playoff game for the first time since 2010. Number 6, Arizona scores 500 or more points. Number 7, Mike Macdonald wins Coach of the Year. Number 8, Maxx Crosby wins Defensive Player of the Year and has 18 sacks. Number 9, Mike McCarthy is the first head coach fired. And number 10, Jayden Daniels leads quarterbacks in rushing yards. That was a good one. That was a fun episode. We haven't really done something like this in the past here on the live stream, so that was really good. Robert says, great show. What is your best side bet in NFL week number 1? We have a game-by-game preview live stream that starts next Wednesday, so we'll leave the game-by-game talk for next Wednesday, Robert. We'll have those thoughts here on the channel. Every single Wednesday at 9 a.m. Pacific, we will be going through every single game on the board all season long. Daniels had the lowest pressure to throw rate in the Power 5 last year, meaning most of the time he was pressured, he chose to scramble rather than throw. Great note there. Not a massive college football guy, so I appreciate that insight when it is. Sebastian, you're not buying the Cardinals 500-plus points as well. Again, I think some of these are going to be great to look back and laugh at. I think a lot of them are going to come true, though. I genuinely believe in all these 10 predictions, so that's going to be a good one as well. George says, love the new set. We did a little bit of renovation here in a temporary stayover apartment before the wife and I move into our house during the Super Bowl bye week coming up in February. So was able to make do, kind of make it a little bit more professional, a little bit more hopefully appealing than some of the past years where there's been a lot going on. So cooled everything down and made it pretty simple. So I'm glad you noticed that and glad you are enjoying that as well. And then David Haywood says the wildest prediction was Niners, Cowboys, Ravens, number 2, where I said all of them will have less than 10 wins. Couple of reminders before we send you on your way. We will have the college football live stream tomorrow at 2 p.m. here on the channel with Eddie and John. That's going to be awesome to see. Eddie's one of the most respected college football bettors on the planet. And so hearing what he has to say about all the big games every week is going to be a great live stream. Saturday morning, set the reminders, 8 a.m. Pacific. We will have the release show here on the channel. And if you want to get involved with all of the NFL picks for the season over at raspicks.com/NFL, you can get all the details to join the subscription service. Plays will go up primarily Monday and Tuesday morning, $7.95 for the full duration of the season if you want to follow along and bet with us on each and every release. And of course, we will be back here with the NFL live stream every single Wednesday from now until February. Thank you, everybody, for stopping by. Have a fantastic rest of your day. Be back here tomorrow at 2 p.m. for the college football live stream. Talk to you soon.